This episode is brought to you by our friends at Notice. Notice is a fast-growing smart glass technology startup headquartered right here in Columbus, Ohio. Notice True Tint technology gives you the ability to change the tint, color, and temperature characteristics of windows, which helps to make buildings more energy efficient and the inside of your car more comfortable. Ahead of a Series A funding round, Notice is investing heavily in Columbus by building its commercialization, systems engineering, and sales teams here. And the company plans to build a manufacturing facility in 2020 as they ramp up production and sales of True Tint to glass manufacturers across North America. To learn more about Notice, explore investment opportunities, and browse their job openings in advanced materials research, systems engineering, sales, and manufacturing, visit noticecorp.com. $614 Startups Nation, welcome to another episode of the 614 Startups Podcast. I'm here with my man, Bernie Moreno, founder of Ownum. Bernie, how you doing, man?
Great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
All right. Right before we press record, man, it wasn't just the tan, it was also the shirt. And I guessed that you were in Florida. So you're down in Florida right now.
Yeah. So I have a home down in the Keys. And so it's a little COVID respite. There's only been 3 deaths down here, like only, I think, 70, 80 cases. So we figured this is a nice place to be during this crazy time.
Yeah. Not only that, but you can get out, enjoy the weather, enjoy the beaches. Have you had a chance to do a lot of that stuff? Have you been down there for a while?
Yeah, so we go boating, go play pickleball, go play golf. It's all pretty open down here because, again, it's just it's a pretty closed community. It's actually, you can't even get into the Florida Keys if you don't live here. There's actually a roadblock, so you can't come in otherwise. So it's been great. I've been coming down here since I was a little kid, and I love the water, love boating. The idea of staying inside my house.
Yeah, for an extended period of time, right? Even if it's necessary, I get it. After a while, it gets to you. So if you can get an escape out there, that's great. So you're my first guest from Cleveland. So welcome. Thank you for opening the way for us to cover the Cleveland area. For people who don't know you, though, can you give us a little bit of your background? You're a Cleveland kid the whole time. What's your backstory?
Sure. So I'll give you my life in 3 minutes. So I born in Colombia, South America. Moved to the United States when I was 5, actually, to right here, South Florida. Learned English when I was 7 years old. Went to study school up at that university up north that you guys refer to. And so from there, went to work for General Motors for the Saturn division. Worked for that company while I was in college, as well as Automobile Magazine when that got created up there as a spinoff from Car and Driver. And then when I graduated, went to work for Saturn full time. Then went to work for a car dealer in Boston, worked for him for 12 years, running a bunch of his dealerships. Moved to Cleveland 15 years ago in this past May, or this month actually, and to buy one little crappy Mercedes dealership in North Olmsted, Ohio, and then grew that into 30 different brands, 4 different states. We did $1 billion in sales. And then about 3 years ago, started selling those dealerships and sold all of them but the Infiniti dealership down here in Coral Gables, Florida. And turned my attention to starting tech companies.
Wow!
Was that 3 minutes or less?
Listen, it was the most interesting 3 minutes ever in the history of this podcast, right? Because you said a lot there, and I just want to touch on one of the things. When I was younger, I loved the Saturn brand, and I don't know if this was kind of the thing Saturn was really known for, but if I remember correctly, the brand was really known for customer experience.
100%.
Yeah, and I know Saturn is no more, right? Yeah. But your time at Saturn, what are some lessons from that venerable company that was so customer focused?
So a few things. Number one, everything at Saturn was basically like going to college again. It was no barriers. Everything was approached as a clean sheet of paper. We looked at the concept of best practices. We looked at the idea of teamwork. We looked at the idea of consensus. Saturn built an insanely incredible culture. Sadly, what happened was General Motors killed it, right? So the idea theoretically was Saturn would create this culture, which it did, and then that culture would infuse itself into General Motors, except the transfusion worked the other way around. The General Motors culture eventually killed Saturn, in the late 90s. And by that point, once they lost their culture, there was really no compelling reason to be with Saturn because it's just another car. But during that magic window, when I worked there, really, it was from 87 to 92. It was just unbelievable. So you just, again, fresh looking at things, don't hold any barriers back, look at everything from a clean sheet of paper, think outside the box, expand your mind. All those things were there. And then on the customer service side of things, it was all about obsession with clients. How do you make the client experience the best possible experience you can? And we really worked hard at that and created an amazing culture at Saturn around that really carried me through my entire automotive career. You know, from that moment forward, I never worked at a car dealership in my life. When I went to work for the guy in Boston, worked for him for 12 years as a general manager. That's my first job. So I never worked at a car dealership in my life and started as a general manager. And really the success of that was really because of the concepts that I had gotten from Saturn.
So now, if you work in the car world, particularly at the dealership level, I'm guessing you're a master salesperson, right? Or at least you have to master some of the skills of being a great salesperson. And I love sales. I think it's absolutely essential for entrepreneurship. So you're working in that world. You're basically learning the retail side of the business, but you decide to go into business for yourself. Is that something you always wanted to do, or like you described this, the little old Mercedes Benz was an offer that you could not refuse, the dealership? What was it? Was it always the plan, or you just came upon a deal that was too good to say no?
The latter. So I always believe that the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is that successful people seize opportunities, and those opportunities are available to everybody. Because sometimes there's a viewpoint that says, "Oh, you got lucky." Everybody gets lucky, right? So the idea is that if you can see that luck has come your way and a window of opportunity opens, most people don't jump through that window. Most people see the window, understand the opportunity, understand the risk, and blink. So the prize goes to the people who jump through that window. So for me, listen, I was making a ton of money working for this guy in Boston. Had 4 kids in private school, had a couple of vacation homes, and all of a sudden decide I'm going to either go broke or be incredibly successful on my own, and it worked. And in hindsight, it was an easy decision. At the time, it was a very difficult one. But again, it goes back to, do you see the opportunity and are you willing to really jump through it and make it happen? And so what I did is, it's really about believing in yourself. It's not about being cocky or arrogant. That's different. But truly believing that you can accomplish what you set your mind to accomplish. And I believed I could. And thanks to a whole lot of other parts of the story, we were able to have some really great success.
Now, I'm originally from Liberia, so immigrant story, kind of first generation. Moved to Jersey when we first came to the States, and then my parents decided to move to Ohio. Now, what was that sales job like? This opportunity comes up. You got to move the whole family. Was everybody excited to move to Ohio? Did you have to do some selling? Cleveland, Ohio at the time. What was everybody's thinking?
So you're married. I know because I saw your daughter the other day. And anybody who's listening to this who's married knows the answer to that question.
Yeah.
so obviously the answer was there was no hell way she wanted to move. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, our spouses, especially if they don't work like my wife doesn't work outside the home, they make a huge sacrifice to be with the kids, and they have a network and groups and play dates and structure. And so think of it like trees with roots that go deep in the soil that we don't understand because we're so tied up in our business every day. But for me one day to say, hey, I'm going to rip up your entire world and transport it 1,500 miles, yeah, that's not easy. That's tough. And but my wife's a trooper. She did it and reestablished roots in Ohio, and it worked out really, really well. But yeah, it was a tough first couple of years moving to Cleveland, especially at the age our kids were. Our kids were little, which makes it easy for them, harder for her, right? Because again, all of her friends were now 1,500 miles away. Blink, blink. But again, fortunately, celebrated 31 years of marriage yesterday. A very lucky guy. I have a great wife, and so that worked out really well.
Yeah, talk about pressure, man. There's a lot of different types of entrepreneurial pressure, but you had to make that work, right? Because it wasn't just about you putting your money and skin in the game. You made that big sale like we all have to sometimes to our spouses to kind of believe in the dream. So, and it all worked out. That's great. Now, you said at the high, you were across 4 states with your dealerships. How many different brands?
30.
30 different brands and close to $1 billion in sales at some point?
Right, exactly, in 2016. Yep.
Okay, and so midlife crisis, what happens that you decide to liquidate this whole thing? What was that process like? Did you have partners at the time? What was everybody's thinking when you decided to do this?
So no partners at all, no partners ever. What my thinking was this: my youngest son had expressed interest in being in the car business, and for the first time, it made me realize what kind of business am I in? That if I have him come in when he's my age, what kind of business did he inherit? And a car dealer is basically an intermediary, right? We don't produce anything, we just sell. But that role of intermediary is the most threatened role by advancement in technology. And so I didn't see a long-term future. And what I didn't want to do is create a business that he then took over, then failed and said, well, I failed because of me. Well, not really because of him. It was really just because of the business model. So then maybe, of course, then the next question was, well, wait a second. If the business is going to eventually go away or massively diminish, why am I in this business? Why don't I get out now when the multiples are very high? And so I did. The multiples were very, very high, much lower today. God, with COVID, a fraction of what they were at the time. And then I'm too young to do nothing, although I've proven in the last few weeks that I can do nothing, right? But that what are some things in technology that I can do? And I've always been somebody that really is obsessed with tech. I joke that I've had 2 obsessions in my life: technology and cars. Cars was the first phase of my life. Technology. Oh, sorry about that. What are some things that I could do around tech? Would really, I could add some value. So we looked at blockchain, saw the applications not in the crypto space, which is where everybody is focused. Because again, I believe that a lot of times these opportunities that come along is not focusing on what people are today, but rather what does this world look like in 2 or 3 or 4 years? So where blockchain was all crypto, it's like, are there other things that you can do with this underlying data system? And the answer was yes. You can take a lot of paperwork out of paperwork intensive processes. And that's where we started Ownum, focused on first car titles, where there's just a lot of friction and everybody in the ecosystem loses. So we created that company. Obviously, I know a lot about that, and it's gone really well.
We're going to take a quick break and be right back after this message from our sponsor. Thompson Hines Quick Launch helps emerging startups get their initial team members onboarded the right way, with all the appropriate legal documentation for a fixed, reasonable cost. Every dollar counts for a startup, and making sure that all your team and equity compensation matters are handled appropriately shouldn't be dictated by costs. With the Thompson Hine Quick Launch Team and Equity Matters bundle, we ensure that you have employee offer letters, NDAs, intellectual property assignments, independent contractor agreements, and advisory board participation agreements. Visit thquicklaunch.com today and get your company and your team set up right. That's excellent. Now, I want to jump into that, but I got to ask you one more question to kind of close out the previous chapter of your life, at least business-wise. So you hear about like Buffett selling all airline stock and it moves the market, right? I'm in the car world is massive, but somebody doing $1 billion in business decides to liquidate. Is there kind of like a ripple across the industry like Bernie Moreno is selling, or is it something that just happens and hey, it happens all the time? People sell their dealerships.
No, so there's a big difference between Bernie Moreno and Warren Buffett.
Okay, all right.
So no, for me, there was a lot of dealers that looked at it and said, "Hey, we've been through many crises in the past. This guy's just, you know, uh, they were maybe raised a little eyebrow." Uh, the one that would have tanked the dealership market is if Warren Buffett had sold his dealerships. He went in deep with a company called Van Tile that he had bought out west. Had he liquidated that company and sold it, that would have probably been a catastrophic blow to the retail model. But me selling didn't really phase much, other than it did raise. It made news. I'm not going to be immodest and say didn't make any difference, but it didn't change the valuations. The big thing that's changed that right now is this COVID-19 crisis, because it's reinforced this idea that, hey, why do I go to a physical place 5, 6, 7, 8 miles from my house and sit there for 3 hours going back and forth on pricing and picking cars out? Why don't I just hit a button and it shows up at my house? So that was always brewing, but COVID has certainly taken that, absolutely strapped the Falcon 9 rocket to it and turbocharged it, and every other cliche you want to use. So that's going to really look at that model. And of course, Tesla, which does not have car dealers, is valued at what all the big three are combined.
Mhm.
So I think in the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to see some real structural change in the car business in a meaningful way.
All right. Now, Ownum, like you said, you'd always been interested in technology and looking at blockchain in particular. Everybody was focused on crypto, but you knew that this technology had multiple applications. So even though I know the term, and I'm happy to confess I don't understand what blockchain is. Can you give us the Cliff Notes version of what it is, and then we could base our conversation on that definition?
Sure, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Like right now, listen, I'm sitting in Key Largo, you're in Columbus, and I'm looking at a 5-inch thing of glass, and my voice and my video is somehow making it to Columbus. How the hell that happens, I have no idea. But we just
Mm-hmm.
accept it, right? We just accept it. So we don't worry about how it works. We worry about what it can do, right? So blockchain, I would caution you and everybody else to say, worry about what it can do and not how it does it. So what blockchain can basically do versus a single use database is allows, think of it like a Google Doc on steroids, where you can have collaboration around paper-based systems and validations, right? So I guess the most rudimentary example I'd give you is a notary. So back way before you and I were even inklings of humans, uh, if you wanted to have your identity proved out on a document, you would go to a government building, show all kinds of documents to some person that you waited in line to see, and they would authenticate your signature, right? Eventually, the government said, this is really horrible. We have these crazy lines. We're going to deputize notaries. And these notaries, under the penalties of perjury and death and public shaming, are going to authenticate these signatures for us. And so now you go to a notary public. That's basically an analog version of what blockchain is. So instead of data residing in a central place that I have to go to that was really inefficient, I can go to a variety of different places. We call in a system, it's called nodes, and those systems authenticate data and prove out whatever it is that you need to be proven out. In the crypto space, that you own that blockchain, that Bitcoin, that you sold it, right? And in the case of car titles, that you have the authority to transfer this title, that you indeed own the vehicle. So it allows data to be stored in a very secure, encrypted way, and to be able to share that information with a lot of trusted parties. So that's basically what blockchain enables. So think of it really anything that requires a lot of manual verification of paper-based systems, right? That's where blockchain works. The most cumbersome paper-based process is money, right? Because somebody's got to validate that you have that money, that it's real, that it's authentic, that it's transferable, that it's transferred, right? That you have a whole ecosystem around that. So Bitcoin kind of solves all that, right? I can pay you immediately right now directly versus going through an intermediary like a Venmo or PayPal or a credit card company or a bank. If I owe you $9,250, I can send you one Bitcoin, and it's instantaneously, and I transfer it from me to you with nobody else in between us. If I owe you $9,250 without crypto, I would have to deposit that money into a bank account. That bank would then send it to you. You would then get it from your bank account, and both of us would pay a lot of fees in that process. So, and it would be slow because there's a lot of verification and validation that would have to happen along the way. So the blockchain is just basically a very, very sophisticated database that allows me to transact directly to you and transfer value to you. Value, whether it's a currency, value, whether it's a car title or anything else.
Okay. So now I can see why in the world of car titles, paper everywhere. We now have to go to a location to transfer titles. You and we got to verify signatures, and Notary Public needs to be there. I can see the value proposition. And so where did this idea come from for you? How did you kind of even come up with this idea for Champ Titles? And where are you guys now in terms of your product? Is it built out? Is it deployed? Where are you guys in the cycle?
So step one was understanding what blockchain was. So everything I just said to you, but over a period of months, understanding the technology, right? So not somebody said, hey, here it is in 30 seconds and that's it, right? So really genuinely diving deep. What is this technology? What can it do? Most importantly, I'd say to people who are watching this, understand what blockchain can't do, because it doesn't solve. There's a whole lot of problems that it doesn't solve that people try to make it solve. So really understand it. So that, for me, that was phase one. Phase two was saying, okay, now that I understand what this technology can do, what are some things that I reasonably am knowledgeable about that are problems that this technology could solve? And anybody who's in the car business knows that car titles are absolutely a bane of every dealer, bank, insurance company, and manufacturer's existence. They're just horrible. This paper is just an abomination to deal with. So I'm like, haha, I know a lot about that. This system solves this technology. Let's start a company that solves that problem. And from there, Champ was born. And where we are right now is we're fortunate to have some really innovative people in government in Ohio. The lieutenant governor is probably the most forward-thinking government official in the country, along with Mike DeWine. And so we hope to launch paperless titles, as they call them, in Ohio in the next few months. And the idea was you don't need to go to a physical location. Like if I'm selling you a car, right? We can agree on everything, the price, everything. You can send me the money, but how do I get that title to you? How do you prove out ownership? And if it's paper, it just slows the whole process down, because you're in a situation where I say to you, all right, Elio, send me the check. You're going to say, well, send me the title. I'm like, dude, I'm not sending you the title until you send me the check. And round we go.
Yeah.
Until you, all right. So I can hit a button, send you the title electronically. You can hit a button and send me the money electronically, and through a smart contract, that transfer happens. And we're both knowledgeable that I'm going to get the money and you're going to get the title. And now it's done, right? You know that you have a clean, secure, clean title in your name, and I know that I've gotten paid for it. So we can enable that without having to spend enormous amounts of friction putting this thing to paper.
Thank you for listening. We're going to take a quick break and be right back after this message from our sponsor. When companies large and small need to solve technological challenges, they turn to AWH. AWH has the experience and expertise to help your company create innovative and disruptive products for the web, mobile, and IoT. Leveraging a deep understanding of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and blockchain, combined with the creativity that comes from their entrepreneurial DNA, AWH gives their clients the competitive advantage. Visit awh.net today and tell them about your project. Now, I work in healthcare, and I think the big innovation in healthcare, going from paper, tons and tons of charts, to try to go more electronic, where everything is documented on a system. The first step was to get all the existing paper onto this system. So what's the plan, even though the state has the goal of going paperless? How do you get now all these existing titles into champ titles so that they can be transferable between people? I would imagine that would be kind of the first thing that you need to get done, right?
No, so no, not at all. So because that's not important. So the state can still issue paper titles. They have something called electronic titles, which is your viewers don't care about that, but it's this hybrid thing that was created for banks, and then paperless titles. So as new titles are transferred, so I sold you that car, that title can be paper today, and you can say I want to keep it in paper. Like right, there's gonna be people who say I don't care about this fancy tech stuff, right? I want my paper title, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's no problem. People can say I want it paperless. Banks can want it paperless. So you transfer it from paper state to the paperless digital state as these transactions happen. So there's no need to move everything from paper to digital immediately. You just wait for this, and eventually, over the next 5, 10 years, the vast majority of what used to be recorded on paper is now recorded digitally. Think of it
So
the same
most of
way
the
as like when you used to fly in a plane and you used to board with a paper boarding card, and now you do it on your phone, and you kind of saw that movement from people who did it right. Maybe one guy, who's that guy? What's he doing with his phone over there? To all of a sudden, what's that guy doing with a piece of paper over there? Right. And so you have this transition from it becomes unusual, you hit a tipping point, and then you move where it's just massively adopted.
I got you. And so I think that's very, very smart. So the idea here is to get in where most of the transactions going forward are happening, which is at the dealer level. Is that correct? So
Yeah.
dealers will offer you at that time the option, and then your title will be there, or the bank holding the title will be in this system. Let's call it champ titles for now, right? Just saying, as this rolls out, maybe you guys are first to market and you represent a lot of those transactions. Um, so do I have to have an account to access champ title once my car is paid off? How is that ultimately transferred to me from the bank when I make my final payment?
Yeah, it's all done through a web portal. So
Okay.
we do it through the web portal. So there's no issues there. So it's very very frictionless, very very easy.
All
And then by the way, the big consumer of car titles is also fleet companies, right? Leasing companies, banks are huge consumers of titles. Only a small percentage of customers actually pay cash for vehicles and own them outright. So this is really an amazing savings for banks and leasing and fleet companies that can manage their giant. I mean, you're talking about, Huntington Bank, for example, probably has 1 million paper car titles, and so for them to be able to have those gone and be able to have 1 million digital records is just, you know, huge cost savings. Again, they're not going to do it from one day to the next, but they can do it over a period of a few years.
Okay. Now COVID-19, right? You mentioned that multiple times, right? It's kind of the unseen thing that's maybe going to change our lives for maybe at least the next 20 years or maybe 10 years or whatever, affecting the car industry. But then you also mentioned fleet. So news of Hertz filing for bankruptcy and some of the others that are managing large fleets of vehicles. So how has COVID-19 either affected your rollout or potentially could affect the move by the state of Ohio to go paperless?
Well, it definitely helps us. I hate to say that because this is something that's hurt so many people, but it's definitely helped us a lot because again, it just reinforces this idea that you don't need people to just. It used to be that people were willing to go because of convenience, and now it's I'm not willing to go because of safety. So this has definitely helped us a lot, and we'll see. I think we'll see a dramatically faster acceleration of online transactions as a result of COVID-19.
Okay. Now, what does champ titles look like at scale? So let's say we, boom, flip the switch, we're going paperless. What does that mean for you operationally? Is that you adding a lot more people? Do you already have the capacity built in? How do you handle that when that switch is on day one?
Yeah, so we see a very controlled rollout. So we hope to start in Ohio. We have some states out west, states in the Midwest, states in the South, and we would bring states on and eventually get to a 50-state solution and then go international from there. And then from cars, we can do motorcycles, boats, ATVs, personal watercraft, all kinds of things. So we see a giant amount of runway, but it's in a very controlled way because we want to make certain that we're doing we can't miss a beat and we have to make certain that we execute perfectly every time.
Well, Bernie, thank you so much for joining me, man. This is my final question. I end all my podcasts this way. So let's project out 5 years, 10 years from now, Ownum, Champ titles, maybe some other companies. What are you looking at over the next 5 to 10 years?
So we want to create the largest technology company in Ohio. So it's a small little goal. That's what we want to be. We think we can do that. We think that Champ is, Fortune 500 company. We have another company, Vital Chain, that we think that we can launch there. And we want to grow and create a Midwest ecosystem and help be part of creating a Midwest ecosystem around technology. We think that a lot of the technology that was created in the coast were created by people from the Midwest. And it's time to bring those people home and have that technology created here and convert the Rust Belt to the Tech Belt. And we want to be a big part of that.
Okay, awesome. Bernie, thank you so much. I end every podcast with my one takeaway. And here's my takeaway. You sold it all, but you kept the Infiniti dealership in Coral Gables. So the car thing is in your blood. You're a Porsche lover. You get to drive them. I'm still visualizing my Porsche. Here's my one takeaway. When the window of opportunity opens, jump through it, even if it's from the 150th floor. Thank you so much, Bernie. Thank you, audience, for joining us again. Peace. That's a wrap. You can find this and all our episodes on our website, 614startups.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and all your favorite podcasting platforms. Don't forget to subscribe and write a review. If you would like updates sent to your inbox, you can sign up for our weekly newsletter on the website. To engage in the 614 Startups community, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 614 Startups to join the conversation. For sponsorship opportunities and collaborations, email us at info@614startups.com. It takes a village to do a podcast, and I would like to say a special thank you to my friends at Waveform Music Group. Andy and Carlin have been working with us to enhance the production of 614 Startups, and we're so happy with the results. Outside of podcast production, Andy and Carlin are experts in sonic branding, songwriting, and music production for companies and creatives. To learn more about them, go to their website, createwaveforms.com. That is, createwaveforms.com.